The first quantum phase weapon struck Sao Paulo at 3:17 Greenwich Mean Time, rendering the entire megalopolis into a crystalline void of frozen matter. No explosion, no fire, no conventional destruction. Just an instantaneous phase shift that transformed 12 million lives into a translucent, stationary sculpture of what once was a thriving city. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the live feed from her underground monitoring station, her fingers gripping the reinforced glass of the observation screen. The quantum phase weapon was something she had theorized about in academic papers that most of her colleagues had dismissed as pure science fiction. Now, those theoretical models were being proven with horrifying precision. "Thermal signature is 0, muttered Dr. Akira Tanaka, his fingers dancing across holographic displays. "Complete molecular arrest. It's like the city was flash frozen at the quantum level." Elena's mind raced. The Zarkoth Collective had been nothing more than a whispered rumor among deep space communication specialists, anomalous signal patterns that suggested a hyper-advanced civilization existing just beyond human detection. Most had written off these signals as cosmic background noise or computational artifacts. She had been different. 5 years ago, when she was still the lead researcher at the Global Quantum Communication Research Center, Elena had dedicated her entire career to decoding these mysterious signals. Her team had developed specialized quantum entanglement receivers capable of capturing micro-transmissions that traditional radio telescopes would have missed entirely. What they discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The Zarkoth were real, and they were nothing like humanity had ever imagined. Their communication didn't resemble any known form of information exchange. It was less a language and more a quantum-level consciousness transmission, a collective intelligence that operated beyond traditional biological or technological barriers. Elena's breakthrough had been developing a partial translation matrix that could capture fragments of their communication. What she discovered suggested a civilization so advanced that individual consciousness was a foreign concept to them. Now that same civilization was systematically dismantling human civilization. Sao Paulo was just the beginning. Synchronized attacks struck major population centers across the globe within milliseconds. New York, Mumbai, Beijing, Lagos. Each city vanished not through explosive force, but through a quantum manipulation that essentially removed them from standard spacetime. Global population loss estimated at 2.3 billion. Akira reported, his voice devoid of emotion. The numbers were too large for human comprehension. Elena's hidden research facility, built deep beneath the Andes Mountains, was one of the few remaining operational command centers. It was a facility so secret that even most government officials were unaware of its existence. Funded through a labyrinthine network of private research grants and black budget allocations, it represented humanity's most advanced technological sanctuary. A series of fail-safe protocols began activating automatically. These weren't simple emergency response systems, but complex adaptive networks designed by Elena and her team. Each protocol was a quantum-encrypted seed, programmed to respond to specific planetary threat scenarios that most had considered pure paranoia. "Failsafe Omega is initializing," a synthetic voice announced. The facility's quantum-shielded systems began an intricate dance of data preservation and strategic response generation. Elena knew something the Zarkoth didn't understand. Humanity wasn't just a collection of individuals. It was an adaptive, resilient system that could transform threat into opportunity. The quantum phase weapons might destroy cities, but they couldn't eliminate human ingenuity. Her eyes, reflecting the holographic displays showing global devastation, held no fear, only a cold, calculating determination that would become the Zarkoth Collective's ultimate miscalculation. "Prepare Nexus Protocol," she commanded, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the underground facility. "If they want a war of absolute destruction, we'll give them something far worse." The first stage of humanity's counterattack was about to begin, not with weapons, but with an understanding of consciousness that the Zarkoth could never anticipate. Marcus Chen stared at the wall of his rehabilitation center, the military discharge papers burning a hole in his jacket pocket. 5 years ago, he had been the United Global Defense Force's most promising strategic analyst, until his radical simulation predicted an extinction-level threat from an unknown quantum consciousness civilization. They called him paranoid, stripped him of his rank, and buried his research so deep that even he couldn't access it anymore. Now, as quantum phase weapons reduced humanity to scattered remnants, irony tasted like ash in his mouth. The Rehabilitation Center, once a cutting-edge medical facility in the Chilean mountains, now served as a refuge for survivors. Its reinforced structure and remote location had saved hundreds, but the psychological toll was evident in every haunted face. Marcus watched a group of children playing a makeshift game with broken communication devices, their laughter a desperate attempt to maintain some semblance of normalcy. A commotion near the entrance drew his attention. A teenage girl was arguing with the center's security detail, her voice a mixture of frustration and barely contained genius. "I'm telling you, these communication protocols are fundamentally flawed." Area Okoi's hands gesticulated wildly, a holographic display flickering between her fingers. At 17, she looked more like a child soldier than a quantum computing prodigy. Her Nigerian parents, both renowned computer scientists, had been among the first casualties in Lagos. Marcus recognized the look in her eyes. He had seen it before in the mirror, the burning need to understand, to solve an impossible problem that everyone else considered unsolvable. "Your Area Okoi," he said, stepping forward. "Your parents published a groundbreaking paper on quantum entanglement communication back in 2152. She turned, surprise momentarily replacing her anger. "You know their work." "I've read everything," Marcus replied. "Your mother's approach to nonlinear quantum information transfer was revolutionary. Your father's work on distributed consciousness networks was decades ahead of its time." Area's defenses dropped slightly. "They said I was too young to understand, but I helped them develop their last research prototype before." Her voice trailed off, the weight of loss hanging between them. Across the facility, a different kind of survivor was undergoing his own reconstruction. Jack Reyes sat motionless in the medical wing, cybernetic implants being calibrated by an automated system. Once a Special Forces operative with the most advanced human-machine interface ever developed, he was now a walking testament to humanity's desperate technological evolution. The implants weren't just enhancement. They were survival. Each circuit, each neural bridge was designed to help humans compete in a technological battlefield where conventional human limitations were a death sentence. Jack's body was 43% synthetic, a result of experimental military programs that had pushed the boundaries of human-machine integration. A medical drone approached, its diagnostic lights scanning Jack's neural interfaces. He didn't flinch. After what he'd seen in the initial Zarkov attack, a medical scan felt almost comically insignificant. Dr. Elena Rodriguez moved between the groups, her movements calculated and purposeful. She was assembling a team, not through traditional military hierarchy, but through a complex algorithm of psychological compatibility and technical expertise. "The Nexus protocol requires more than just technical skill," she muttered, reviewing holographic profiles. "We need individuals who can think beyond conventional systems, survivors who understand that our greatest weapon is our capacity to adapt." Marcus caught her eye. They had worked together briefly, years ago, before his discharge. He knew she remembered his controversial research, the same research that had predicted this exact scenario. "You were right," Elena said simply, approaching him. "About the quantum consciousness threat." Marcus laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Being right doesn't feel like much of a victory right now." Area interrupted, her fingers still dancing across her improvised quantum interface. "If we can modify the existing communication protocols using a nonlinear entanglement matrix, we might be able to create a distributed intelligence network that could hack the Zarkov," Marcus finished, a spark of understanding passing between them. Jack looked up from his medical bay, cybernetic eye calibrating with a soft blue pulse. "I'm in," he said simply. "Whatever it takes to make them pay." Elena smiled, not a warm expression, but a calculated one that spoke of strategic potential. The team was coming together. Humanity's last, most unlikely hope was being assembled in a mountain refugee center, built from the broken pieces of a civilization brought to its knees. The counterattack was about to begin. The underground research facility hummed with a tension that transcended technological infrastructure. Holographic displays flickered with impossibly complex data streams, each projection a testament to humanity's last desperate attempt to understand the unknowable. Area Okoi stood before a massive quantum entanglement matrix, her fingers moving with a musician's precision across multiple interface points. Lines of code transformed into three-dimensional representations of alien communication patterns, fractal structures that defied traditional computational models. "It's not just a language," she muttered, more to herself than to the others. "It's a living consciousness. The Zarkoth don't communicate. They are communication." Marcus Chen watched her work, his strategic mind dissecting every movement. The girl was processing information at a rate that would have been impossible just a decade ago. Quantum neural interfaces, developed in secret military labs, had transformed human cognitive potential. But Area was something else entirely, a bridge between human creativity and computational absolute. The fundamental problem, Marcus explained to Jack, who was calibrating his own cybernetic systems nearby, is that the Zarkoth don't think like we do. They're a collective consciousness. No individual identity. No personal ambition. No internal conflict. Jack's cybernetic eye flickered, running diagnostic patterns. "Sounds like a weakness to me." Elena Rodriguez approached the central holographic display, her fingers tracing the alien communication patterns. Years of research had prepared her for this moment, decoding a form of intelligence that existed beyond human comprehension. "Precisely," she said. "Their strength is also their critical vulnerability. A collective consciousness requires perfect synchronization. Remove that synchronization, and the entire system collapses." The Nexus Protocol was more than a weapon. It was a philosophical assault on an alien intelligence that had never conceived of individual variation. Area pulled up a complex visualization. Quantum communication threads twisted like luminescent DNA strands, showing how the Zarkoth processed information. "Look," she said, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and barely contained rage. "Their entire network operates on a principle of absolute consensus. Every informational unit must align perfectly with the collective understanding." Marcus leaned in. "Which means if we can introduce even the slightest cognitive dissonance, we can create a cascading failure throughout their entire consciousness." Elena finished. The weapon they were developing wasn't a traditional technological tool. It was a cognitive virus designed to exploit the fundamental weakness of a perfect collective intelligence. By introducing micro-variations, unpredictable thought patterns, and deliberate informational contradictions, they could theoretically cause a systemic breakdown. Jack connected several modified quantum relay modules, his cybernetic implants interfacing directly with the experimental hardware. "These neural disruptors can amplify cognitive inconsistencies," he explained. "Think of it like introducing emotional chaos into a perfectly ordered system." Elena pulled up historical research, studies on collective behavior, swarm intelligence, psychological warfare. Humanity's understanding of group dynamics would become their most sophisticated weapon. "We're not just fighting," she said, her voice cold and precise. "We're conducting the most complex psychological experiment in human history." Area's fingers danced across the interface, and suddenly the holographic display transformed. What had been alien communication patterns began to fracture, introducing impossible variations. Random mathematical sequences interrupted perfect geometric flows. Emotional resonance algorithms created deliberate informational noise. "The Zarkoth process information like a perfect crystal," Area explained. "But we're going to introduce entropy. Randomness. The very thing their collective consciousness cannot comprehend." Marcus watched the display, understanding the profound implications. This wasn't just about survival. This was about proving the superiority of individual human consciousness, its capacity for creativity, for unexpected solutions, for turning chaos into strategy. "We're going to make them understand something they've never experienced," he said quietly. Individual fear, personal doubt, the beautiful, terrible uncertainty of being truly alive. The Nexus Protocol took shape, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a philosophical attack that would challenge the very foundation of the Zarkoth's existence. Humanity's counterattack was about to begin, and its first assault would be launched not with bullets or bombs, but with the most dangerous weapon in the universe, an idea. The stealth shuttle Prometheus hung in the darkness between Earth's decimated orbit and the massive Zarkoth communication nexus. Itoll, composed of metamaterial camouflage that bent quantum-level light signatures, made it virtually undetectable to conventional and advanced scanning systems. Jack Reyes ran final system checks, his cybernetic interfaces merging with the shuttle's advanced navigation network. Each movement was a calculated dance of human intuition and machine precision. His body was more than just augmented. It was a living weapon, redesigned to interface with technologies that would kill an unmodified human within microseconds. Quantum signature stabilization at 98.7%. Aria's voice came through the comm system. She was hundreds of kilometers away in the underground facility, her consciousness partially linked to Jack's mission through an experimental neural bridge. "You've got a 3-microsecond window of quantum interference that will mask your approach." Marcus Chen's voice cut in, clinical and precise. "Remember, this isn't about destruction. We need surgical precision. One wrong move, and the entire Nexus Protocol becomes compromised." Jack's cybernetic eye zoomed in on the Zarkoth communication hub, a structure that defied traditional understanding of engineering. It wasn't constructed. It was grown, a living network of quantum crystalline structures that pulsed with an alien intelligence. Tendrils of light-matter communication wrapped around its core like neural networks, each strand carrying billions of information packets per nanosecond. "Approaching quantum phase interface," Jack muttered. His right arm, a marvel of human engineering, began to transform. Nanomechanical structures reconfigured, turning his entire limb into a sophisticated quantum transmission device. Developed in the most classified military labs before the invasion, it was designed to interface with technologies beyond human comprehension. The first layer of Zarkoth defense was a quantum consciousness barrier. Traditional infiltration methods would be detected instantly, but Jack wasn't using traditional methods. "Initiating cognitive mimicry protocol," he said, his voice eerily calm. The nanomechanical structures in his arm began to generate a quantum signal that wasn't an attack. It was a perfect imitation of the Zarkoth's own communication patterns. Like a chameleon changing colors, Jack's technological signature began to blend into the alien network. Aria watched from her remote station, her fingers dancing across quantum entanglement interfaces. Synchronization at 62%, 73%, 85%. Her breath caught. "You're in." The interior of the communication hub was nothing like human technology. It was a living, breathing network of quantum consciousness. Information didn't flow. It existed simultaneously in multiple states. Jack's augmented senses perceived multiple dimensions of reality, his cybernetic implants filtering and interpreting signals that would drive an unaugmented human mind to instant insanity. "Nexus nodes identified," he reported, preparing quantum entanglement insertion. Each node was a critical point in the Zarkoth communication network. Inserting the Nexus Protocol's initial seeds would be like introducing a microscopic cancer into a perfect organism. Slow, deliberate, devastating. Marcus's voice was tense. "Jack, you have exactly 94 seconds before quantum detection algorithms will begin to recognize the anomaly." The nodes looked like crystalline structures, but Jack understood they were living communication points. Each represented a collective decision-making hub for the Zarkoth. Introducing the quantum entanglement seeds would be like whispering doubt into a perfectly synchronized mind. His cybernetic arm extended, nanomechanical structures creating a quantum transmission point that defied traditional understanding of physical interaction. The first node accepted the transmission, a perfect mimicry of the Zarkov's own communication syntax. First node compromised, Jack reported. Suddenly, alarms began to pulse in quantum frequencies. Something was wrong. Detecting quantum consciousness interference. Aria's voice became urgent. They're starting to recognize. Jack knew what came next. This was never going to be a mission with a return ticket. Tell Elena, he said, his voice calm. The first wave is successful. The communication hub began to pulse with chaotic energy, quantum-level disruptions spreading like a virus through its perfect network. Humanity's counterattack had officially begun. The first signs of the Nexus Protocol's effectiveness manifested in ways no one could have predicted. Deep within the Zarkov fleet, quantum communication channels began to fracture. It started as microscopic inconsistencies, infinitesimal breaks in the perfect synchronization that had defined their collective consciousness for millennia. A single moment of doubt, a microscopic hesitation. Aria watched the holographic displays with a mixture of scientific fascination and visceral rage. Each fluctuation represented more than data. It was a blow against the civilization that had obliterated her family, her city, her entire world. "Look," she said to Elena and Marcus, her voice a blend of awe and clinical precision. "The cognitive dissonance is spreading exponentially." The displays showed Zarkov battle groups experiencing something unprecedented in their evolutionary history, individual uncertainty. Where once there had been perfect, instantaneous consensus, now there were micro-moments of divergence. Quantum communication channels that had once flowed like perfectly synchronized rivers now became turbulent, unpredictable streams. Marcus leaned forward, his strategic mind analyzing every fluctuation. "We're not just attacking their communication," he explained. "We're introducing the concept of individual doubt into a consciousness that has never experienced individual thought." Elena's fingers traced the holographic projections. Years of research had prepared her for this moment. A psychological warfare strategy that went beyond any conventional understanding of conflict. "The Zarkov evolved as a pure collective consciousness," she said. "Individual variation was impossible. Until now." On their quantum communication networks, the first signs of true chaos began to emerge. Battle groups started to question strategic decisions that would have once been implemented with absolute instantaneous anonymity. Defensive formations began to show microscopic hesitations. Supply lines became slightly less efficient. To an outside observer, these changes would have seemed imperceptible. But for the Zarkov, it was equivalent to a human suddenly developing multiple competing personalities simultaneously. Aria's quantum algorithms continued to work their insidious magic. Each introduced cognitive variation was like a precision-engineered virus, targeting the most fundamental aspect of Zarkov existence, their perfect collective consciousness. "We're giving them something they've never experienced," Aria said, her young face hardened with determination. Individual fear. The first major indication of the protocol's success came from long-range quantum communication intercepts. Zarkov battle groups began to show signs of internal conflict. Defensive strategies became slightly less coordinated. Decision-making processes developed microscopic delays. Marcus pulled up a comparative analysis. "Look at the communication density," he pointed out. "Before our intervention, their quantum communication channels were operating at near-perfect synchronization. Now, we're seeing variation, uncertainty." Elena understood the profound implications. This wasn't just a military strategy. This was a fundamental assault on an entire civilization's way of existing. "They're experiencing something impossible in their evolutionary framework," she said. Individual thought. Personal doubt. The Zarkov fleet began to show the first true signs of systemic breakdown. Battle groups that would have once moved with perfect synchronization now displayed slight hesitations. Defensive formations became marginally less efficient. Supply line calculations developed microscopic errors. To human observers, these changes would have seemed minimal. But for a civilization that had never experienced individual variation, it was apocalyptic. Aria's quantum algorithms continued their precise, devastating work. Each introduced cognitive variation was a precision-engineered virus, targeting the most fundamental aspect of Zarkov existence, their perfect collective consciousness. "We're rewriting the fundamental rules of their existence," Marcus observed, introducing chaos into a system that was built on absolute order. The psychological warfare had begun in earnest. Humanity wasn't just fighting. They were conducting the most complex cognitive experiment in galactic history. And for the first time, the Zarkov experienced something truly terrifying: the beautiful, terrible uncertainty of individual consciousness. The first true cracks in their civilization had begun to form. The first warning came through an encrypted channel that should have been impossible to breach. Admiral Victoria Rosenberg sat in the shadows of the United Earth Continuity Command, a facility so deep beneath the Andes Mountains that it existed in a realm between reality and myth. Her fingers, lined with the scars of decades of military service, traced the holographic communique that would destroy everything they had fought to achieve. "Transmission confirmed," her AI assistant reported. "Origin: Deep State Preservation Protocol." The message was simple, brutally direct. A faction within human leadership believed survival meant submission, not resistance. The Zarkov Collaborative Integration Directive proposed a systematic human surrender. Not total extinction, but complete subjugation. Certain human technological and genetic lines would be preserved. Critical infrastructure would remain intact. In exchange, humanity would become a managed subspecies within the Zarkov collective consciousness, and there were human leaders ready to accept. Marcus Chen discovered the first evidence of the betrayal buried within layers of quantum-encrypted communications. His fingers moved with surgical precision, peeling back layers of digital subterfuge that would have been invisible to any other analyst. "They're not just considering surrender," he told Elena, his voice a mixture of rage and clinical detachment. "They're actively negotiating our species' entire future." Elena's response was immediate. "Who?" A holographic display materialized, showing a network of political and corporate leaders. Names that had once represented humanity's most powerful institutions now looked like collaborators in the most profound betrayal in human history. The Global Resource Management Consortium, Transnational Technology Integration Networks, the remnants of what were once called governments. They saw the Zarkov not as destroyers, but as an opportunity for controlled evolution. "Some believe we can be preserved," Marcus explained, "but at the cost of everything that makes us human." Aria's quantum communication network began picking up fragmented transmissions. Her young face hardened as she decoded the implications. "They're offering our best minds, our most advanced genetic lines, as a form of biological preservation." The betrayal went deeper than simple capitulation. These humans saw the Zarkov not as conquerors, but as evolutionary partners. A chance to transcend human limitations by becoming part of a perfect collective consciousness. Jack Reyes, still recovering from his infiltration mission, understood the stakes better than anyone. His cybernetic augmentations gave him a perspective that bridged human individuality and technological integration. "They don't understand," he said, his voice a mechanical growl. "The Zarkov don't preserve. They assimilate." Admiral Rosenberg activated the final failsafe, a protocol so secret that its very existence was known to fewer than a dozen humans in the entire world. Project Prometheus wasn't just a backup plan. It was humanity's nuclear option. If the surrender proceeded, a cascading destruction protocol would activate, not just of human infrastructure, but of every piece of technology that could potentially be reverse-engineered by the Zarkov. "We'll burn everything," she muttered, "before we let them have it." The underground facility became a war room, not just against the Zarkov, but against the human collaborators who saw surrender as salvation. Area's quantum algorithms began tracing the communication networks of the potential collaborators. Each transmission, each encrypted message became a potential weapon. Marcus developed counterintelligence strategies that would make the traditional concept of psychological warfare look like child's play. "We're fighting a war on two fronts now," Elena said, her voice cold and precise. "The Zarkov, and the humans who would sell our species for a promise of survival." The Nexus Protocol transformed. No longer just a weapon against the alien collective, it became a surgical instrument of human preservation. A way to identify, isolate, and neutralize the collaborators while continuing the assault on the Zarkov consciousness. Humanity's most dangerous weapon had always been its capacity for adaptation. Now that adaptation would be tested like never before. The real war was just beginning. The quantum entanglement chamber pulsed with an energy that defied conventional understanding of matter and consciousness. Elena Rodriguez stood at its center, her body becoming something more and less than human. Final neural synchronization at 97.3%. Aria's voice came through the communication system, her fingers dancing across quantum interfaces that seemed to bend reality itself. Marcus watched the holographic displays, his strategic mind racing to comprehend what was happening. Elena was transforming into the living embodiment of the Nexus Protocol, a human consciousness designed to become a weapon beyond any traditional understanding of warfare. The process had begun as a theoretical concept. Now, it was humanity's final, most desperate strategy. The human mind, Elena had explained during the initial phases of the project, is the most complex quantum system we know. More unpredictable than any computer, more adaptive than any collective consciousness. Her body began to shimmer, quantum-level changes occurring faster than traditional sensors could track. The chamber was more than a technological construct. It was a bridge between human consciousness and a form of existence the Zarkov could never comprehend. Marcus remembered the early discussions, how they had discovered that the human capacity for individual thought, with all its chaos, its emotional complexity, its ability to hold contradictory ideas simultaneously, was their most potent weapon against the Zarkov's perfect collective consciousness. "Quantum neural mapping complete," Aria reported, her voice a mixture of scientific excitement and barely contained terror. Jack Reyes, his cybernetic systems interfaced with the chamber's monitoring equipment, understood the risks better than anyone. "She's becoming a living transmission," he muttered, "a consciousness that can infiltrate and destroy from within." The transformation wasn't just technological, it was philosophical. Elena was turning herself into a living virus, a consciousness designed to introduce absolute chaos into the Zarkov's perfect system. Remember, Elena had told them during the final briefing, "Our greatest strength is our capacity to be unpredictable, to feel, to doubt, to love. These are things the Zarkov cannot comprehend." Her consciousness began to expand beyond the physical limitations of her body. Quantum entanglement allowed her to exist simultaneously in multiple states, a living embodiment of the uncertainty principle that the Zarkov's collective consciousness could not process. Aria's algorithms worked in perfect synchronization, creating a neural bridge that would allow Elena to penetrate the deepest levels of the Zarkov communication network. Each microsecond introduced millions of potential variations, each variation a weapon more sophisticated than any physical assault. "Initiating consciousness transmission," Marcus said, his voice clinical and precise. The chamber erupted with a light that wasn't light, a quantum phenomenon that existed between perception and reality. Elena's consciousness began to spread through the Zarkov network like a living thought, introducing something they had never experienced. True individual consciousness. "I am becoming the message," Elena's voice echoed through the quantum channels. "I am the virus of individuality." Jack understood the ultimate sacrifice. This wasn't just a mission. This was a complete transformation of human potential. Elena was turning herself into a living weapon, a consciousness that could destroy the Zarkov from within by introducing the most dangerous concept in their universe, individual thought. The Zarkov had believed their collective consciousness was their ultimate strength. They would learn it was their most critical weakness. Area's displays showed the quantum network beginning to fracture. Not through destruction, but through the introduction of something far more dangerous: doubt, uncertainty, the capacity to think differently. Transmission reaching critical quantum potential, Area reported, her voice breaking. Marcus watched as Elena's physical form began to dissolve, her consciousness spreading through quantum channels like a living thought. She was becoming something more than human, a pure expression of individual consciousness weaponized against a collective that could not comprehend individuality. For humanity, Elena's final transmission came through. We introduce chaos. The quantum chamber erupted. Reality itself seemed to bend. And the first true assault on the Zarkov began. The aftermath was not a victory in any traditional sense. It was a transformation. Scattered human settlements washed as the Zarkov fleet, once an invincible collective of quantum-synchronized consciousness, began to disintegrate. Not through physical destruction, but through a more profound existential collapse. Area Okoi stood at the observation deck of the last remaining global research station, her fingers tracing the quantum communication patterns that now danced like fractured light across the monitoring systems. Where once there had been perfect, synchronized alien communication, now there were individual signals. Chaotic, unpredictable, alive. They're breaking apart, Marcus Chen observed, his strategic mind analyzing every quantum fluctuation. Not just their fleet, their entire civilization. Jack Ray's, his cybernetic systems interfaced with the global monitoring network, understood the profound implications. Elena's sacrifice wasn't just an attack, he said. It was a philosophical invasion. The Zarkov had been a collective consciousness that had existed for millennia. Perfect synchronization. Absolute consensus. No individual thought. No personal identity. Elena's transformation had introduced something they could never comprehend. The beautiful, terrible uncertainty of individual existence. Quantum communication channels that had once flowed with perfect synchronization now became a cacophony of individual signals. Each signal represented a fragment of consciousness discovering itself for the first time. Confusion, terror, wonder, individuality. It's like watching a collective mind learn what it means to be an individual, Area said, her voice a mixture of scientific fascination and profound empathy. The human settlements that had survived were not celebrating. They were witnessing something far more significant than a military victory. They were watching the birth of a new form of consciousness. Marcus pulled up historical records, comparing the transformation to other paradigm-shifting moments in human history. It's similar to how early humans developed individual consciousness, he explained. The moment when tribal thinking gave way to individual identity. Refugee camps became centers of unprecedented research. The quantum communication networks that had been used as a weapon now became a window into a profound evolutionary moment. Fragments of the Zarkov consciousness began to reach out, seeking understanding. They're trying to communicate, Jack observed, but not as a collective. As individuals. Area's quantum algorithms work to translate these new, fractured communications. Each transmission was a journey of self-discovery. Beings that had never known individual thought were experiencing emotions, doubts, fears for the first time. The global research team began to understand the true nature of Elena's sacrifice. She hadn't just attacked the Zarkov. She had birthed them into a new form of existence. We didn't destroy them, Marcus said, reviewing the data. We evolved them. Scattered Zarkov vessels began sending transmissions that were nothing like their previous communications. Personal. Confused. Seeking understanding. Each transmission was a declaration of individual existence. Jack's cybernetic systems detected something unprecedented. The Zarkov were asking questions, not as a collective, but as individual entities discovering themselves for the first time. Who am I? What does it mean to be? I feel something. Aereo worked to translate these fragmentary communications, each one a window into a consciousness experiencing individual thought for the first time. The human settlements that had survived began to realize that this was more than a war. It was a profound evolutionary moment. Humanity had not just defended itself. It had introduced a new concept of consciousness to an entire civilization. "We gave them the most dangerous gift," Elena had said in her final transmission. "The capacity to be individual." As quantum communication networks continued to pulse with newly discovered individual signals, humanity watched. Not with triumph, but with a profound understanding of the most powerful weapon in the universe, the ability to help another consciousness discover itself. The war was over, but something far more significant had just begun. A new form of existence was emerging from the quantum depths.